Nadaljujemo pa že z naslednjim predavateljem in sicer se bomo večino potopili na samo področje uporabe in samozdravljenja s konopljo. In sicer iz Barcelone prihaja klinični psiholog, ki se trenutno ukvarja kot direktor projektov pri Mednarodnem centru za etnobotanično izobraževanje, raziskovanje in strukture, tudi za raziskovanje samega samozdravljenja s konopljo. In tisto, kar je zanimivo in kar smo izvedeli predvsem na prejšnjem seminarju, na tistem uvodnem seminarju v sklopu cikla Demystifikacije konoplje, je dejstvo, da ima konoplja terapevtske učinke. Dokazi seveda o uporabnosti v medicinskih namenih, v medicinske namene so nesporni, še vedno pa morajo marsikateri bolniki, ki se odločijo za zdravljenje s konopljo, poseči po samozdravljenju. O tem nam bo, kot rečeno, znal največ povedati naš naslednji govorec, zato lepo prosim za en velik aplavz, prihaja dr. José Bouso.
Well, thank you very much to the honor organization for inviting me to this conference, and thank you very much for coming. I will talk about self-medication with cannabis because I think that the situation, the political situation and the drug policies that are implanted in almost of the countries of the world led to many people that will benefit using cannabis to use cannabis via self-medication and without any medical control. I think that we are attending to a very big experiment with millions of people being self-medicating with cannabis and without any medical advice. I will start my presentation talking about very basic things about cannabis. Then I will talk about the basis of why cannabis could be a medicine, and then I will talk about why people with illness use cannabis and what are the reasons why they use it. Well, I suppose that everybody knows that cannabis have three different varieties: cannabis sativa, indica, and ruderalis. Cannabis sativa and cannabis indica is the source of the THC, that is the principal psychoactive component, and cannabis ruderalis is used only for industrial hemp. The plant of cannabis is a truly factory of chemical compounds. The flowers of the plant synthesize about 400 different compounds, and of them, about 60 or 70 are exclusive cannabinoids, what we know about of cannabinoids, that are compounds, chemical compounds, that are only present in the plant of cannabis. The more relevant active principles are THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, that is the mainly psychoactive compound, but there are other compounds, CBD or cannabidiol, that has sedative and anxiolytic properties. The other component is cannabinol, that has 10% of psychoactivity compared to THC, but as I saw before, there are around 60 or 17 cannabinoids, and each day we are knowing the properties of the different cannabinoids. The medicine was focused in the past more in THC. Now there is a very big interest in CBD for several reasons that I will try to explain later. But it's time we know the properties of different cannabinoids. We also know that in the plant we have also terpenes and flavonoids that have also medical properties and are very important also in the effects that when somebody uses the whole plant experience. Well, nature used to play with different molecular chemicals, and these are the main principal cannabinoids, THC, CBN, and CBD, and nature knows that playing and putting or quitting chemical groups or carbon chains increase or reduce the psychoactivity of the different products, and make that each product or chemical compound have certain properties. This is happening also in the endogenous cannabinoids. The principal are anandamide and 2-AG that are cannabinoids that are inside our central system. In fact, the only plant that we know that have cannabinoids until the moment, we don't know if in the future somebody will discover a plant that also has cannabinoids, but for the moment, only Cannabis sativa in all of the whole vegetal kingdom is the only plant who synthesizes cannabinoids. But on the other side, every animal, from mussels to humans, synthesize endocannabinoids because endocannabinoids serve to regulate different physiological functions. We don't have an endogenous system of cannabinoids just to smoke joints, because mussels, by example, cannot smoke marijuana because they live in the water, by example. But the reason why we have cannabinoids inside of our organism is because serve to induce several physiological effects. These several physiological effects are because when our endogenous cannabinoids or when the exogenous cannabinoids from the cannabis plant interact with a protein named receptor CB or CB receptor that, when is coupled, produce a series of physiological effects. The cannabinoid receptors are located mainly in our brain, in certain areas of our brain, but also in the immune system. And that is the reason why cannabis serves to deal with a lot of illness. Here you can see a representation of the locations of CB1 receptor and CB2 receptor. CB1 receptor are above all in our brain, and CB2 receptors are in peripheral systems, principally in the immune system. The reason why we have a lot of, a very ample distribution of cannabinoid receptors in our body, this is the reason why when we ingest marijuana, marijuana can interact with these receptors and serve to treat certain illness. As I saw before, there are a lot of different non-psychoactive cannabinoids that are getting investigating each day, and there is a very list of possible illness that can be treated with different cannabinoids. Well, but the use of marijuana is not a recent practice in science. In humanity, has maybe thousands of years, but in medicine, in Western medicine, have a long history also. In the 70s, began to be used some synthetic forms of THC that were used mainly for the treatment of nausea and vomiting in cancer patients. Now, recently, there is a commercial product named Sativex that have the same part of THC and the CBD in 1:1 proportion. It's an oral mucus spray, and in the European Union is commercialized to treat multiple sclerosis, and we have also medical cannabis. With medical cannabis, I'm referring to standardized herbal cannabis that can be used of different forms. Until I know, the only company that produces medical cannabis is based in Holland, is Berrokam, and he grows marijuana that meets the quality requirements of the EUA, and this allows to sell in pharmacies, in Holland pharmacies, these kind of these varieties of cannabis. The principal indications are treatment of nausea and vomits in chemotherapy, anorexia associated to loss of weight in AIDS, multiple sclerosis, and different compassionate uses. Also is sometimes used in palliative medicine to increase appetite and nausea alleviating. Sometimes if you combine opiates with marijuana, you need to use lower doses of opiates because opiates potentiate the analgesic effects of marijuana and vice versa. And also there are some studies in the treatment of spasticity and in other illness, different to multiple sclerosis, Tourette syndrome. Until now, there are more than 100 clinical trials where different cannabis preparations have been employed to treat or to see if can be of benefit in different illness. This is a picture of the synthetic THC, and this is a picture of Sativex. Sativex have now 3 patents, one for the treatment of cancer, because in laboratory cultives and cells have been shown that cannabinoids have some anti-cancer properties. Also have a patient for use it as an oxidant and neuroprotector, and it also have a patent for CBD for the treatment of child epilepsy. This is the marijuana that is sold in the pharmacies of Holland. And also we have now, because the inhalated via of administration is the most precise way of self-administering cannabis, but it's a very harm way of administration because it produces combustion, and the combustion may have cancerous particles, but using vaporizers that don't burn the weed material, but only vaporize it, and with the vaporization, we can extract the different cannabinoids without producing cancerous particles. Well, for the moment, there are more than 2,000 people that have been passed in the different clinical trials. The principal side effects that the clinical trials show of using marijuana, from a physical point of view, fatigue, dizziness, tachycardia, dry mouth, decreased hearing. The tolerance develops to many of the side effects, especially fatigue, dizziness, and cardiovascular effect and psychoactivity. But one very interesting thing that happens with marijuana is that not induce tolerance to medical effects. That means that you don't need to increase the dose. You must need to increase the dose to experience the psychoactive effects, but you don't need to increase the dose to experience the medical effects. There are many people that think that if they are done getting high, they are not experiencing the medical effects of marijuana, but this is not true. Maybe people who develop tolerance, even if have no effects because has a lot of tolerance, this person will keep experiencing the medical properties. Well, have been described withdrawal syndrome, only occurs after abrupt cessation in heavy users and are similar in intensity and characteristics to those seen after the sudden cessation of quitting tobacco. There is no evidence of abuse, cognitive effects, and psychopathological effects in patients treated in clinical trials. And marijuana is has a better tolerability of sativase and marijuana flows compared with dronabinol. That means that the whole plant, I think that at the end we will have the turn for questions. Sorry. Well, there are some contraindications and normal sensitivity to cannabinoid compounds, several personality disorders and psychosis, and special cautions, pregnant breastfeeding, children and adolescents, elderly with cardiovascular vulnerability, and hepatitis C. What would be the benefits of cannabis regulations as a medicine? Well, to have more treatment alternatives, adjuvant to standard treatments, alternatives for different cannabinoid preparations. For example, we can combine dronabinol or nabinol oxativase or cannabis flows, depending on what is better or what prefer the patient. We will have also different methods of use, routes of administration, and possibility of combining different marijuana varieties. Medical marijuana is cheaper for the patient and for the public spending than pharmacies compounds. Medical marijuana has physical and psychological best tolerability than pharmacies preparations, and possibility to have pharmaceutical grade of medical marijuana, and also facility, of course, for clinical and epidemiological research. That's all I wanted to talk about. Generalities about cannabis and the medicine of cannabis. What we know about the medical effects of cannabis came from the clinical trials, but clinical trials are experiments that usually last 3, 4, 6 weeks, but we don't know what happens with people are taking marijuana with medical purposes in long intervals of time. Because medical marijuana is forbidden in almost all the world, the only information that we have about what kind of illness can be treated with marijuana, how patients prefer to intake marijuana, how do they feel the side effects, this kind of information we can only know it developing surveys in survey studies, and I will show you some of the surveys that have been published in order to, the first study was done in different countries of the European Union, and we find some interesting thing that, at least for me, I think that are interested. Patients used to prefer to smoke cannabis, more even than vaporized cannabis, and they don't like too much the synthetic form of cannabis, maybe because THC is alone has not the other different cannabinoids that cooperate to increase tolerability when somebody smoke or intake the cannabis. And the satisfaction of the users, again, the highest level of satisfaction is with is smoking, better than vaporized. And the pharmaceutical form, Sativex, Nabiximols, has also the same level of satisfaction than the vaporized form. The preference of the patients for smoking cannabis is independent of the illness. If we compare different illness, chronic pain, anxiety, loss of weight, loss of appetite and or weight, depression and insomnia or sleeping disorders, the most preferred route of administration is smoking cannabis. In the UA, patients used to be between 2 and 3 grams per day. They smoke with a daily frequency of six times. And they obtain the first onset of the effects when they smoke a vaporizer more quick than in oral forms. Well, marijuana, when is in smoked or vaporized, has also a very high tolerability. They score 8 in a thorough 10 scale. And there are some interesting things when we isolate the Netherlands from the rest of the European Union in terms of drug policy. In 2003, started the first national program of selling marijuana in pharmacies. So in Holland, people can go to the coffee shop to buy marijuana for recreational purposes, but also if he or she is a patient, he or she can go to a pharmacist where he can buy marijuana with a prescription and protected by the social security. Well, if in the European Union, the median of the grams were of 3 grams per patient, if we go to the Holland reality, we see that patients used to use 0.68 grams of marijuana. That is a very considerable reduction regarding the rest of Europe. Maybe here there are some explanations or some political reasons or socio-political reasons that we can talk about in the debate. There were also an increase. Sometimes some politicians say that if medical marijuana is allowed for patients, there were a lot of healthy people that will go to buy marijuana, saying that they are illness. When you have the two possibilities in the market, the medical one and the non-medical one, there is no increase of people who have some kind of medical problems going to marijuana. And the other thing that I think that is interesting above all in this moment where we attend to this competence between company seeds that trying to sell marijuana or seeds of marijuana as much or more medical or medicinal than other companies. Well, the government of Holland sells different kinds of marijuana with different ratios of THC and CBD, and there is no tendency to prefer one variety or another. Patients have no special trend to one or another, independent of the ratio of THC CBD, excepting for the ratio that has the same amount of THC and CBD, but this is an artifact because this was a variety that was introduced in the pharmacy of Holland very recently, so we have no data for the moment to know if patients prefer more or less this new variety. There is another study that was made in Holland with the same different varieties of marijuana, and when they asked patients for the frequency of hallucination, again, there were no difference between the 3 different varieties of marijuana with different THC CBD ratios. And where patients were asked about fulfillment alleviation, again, the 3 varieties are the same. This has an explication. THC is the principal medical component of marijuana. CBD has reached a lot of or recently attention because it would be of interest for treating principally schizophrenia, epilepsy, and maybe also like an anxiolytic, but for the rest of medical conditions, THC is yet the main medical compound. In fact, when people was asked about different subjective effects like sociability, create stimulation, irritability, fatigue, disorientation, dizziness, confidence, tranquility, and alertness. There were no, again, difference between the three varieties of marijuana, and were only so difference in appetite stimulation. Varieties with higher THC increase the appetite stimulation. Anxiety, varieties with higher THC compound induce more anxiety, and dejection, that is the same. Well, you know that there are at least 20 states in the United States where medical marijuana is allowed in several states. There are more than 20,000 patients in the different programs, and the illness for using cannabis are the same that in the rest of the world. The main reason is for treating several chronic pain, but there are some others. This is a survey that was made in different dispensaries of California. Well, again, patients use marijuana to treat pain, muscular pains, etc. But one thing that is very of interest in this study was that 50% of the sample use marijuana as a substitute for prescription medicines. It seems that for a lot of people, marijuana can be substituted for other medicines or for prescription medicines. In fact, when we say, or when we hear again that if we regulate the medical situation, there were a lot of people that who will, of a lot of ill people that who will to take marijuana, but this is not what we see in these survey studies. People that have some kind of ills have the same prejudice that have ourselves of the normal people. So, and the normal people have a lot of prejudices regarding the effects that marijuana will be in their brain or in their behavior. And these are the same prejudices that have much of patients. So patients used to try a lot of different treatments before finishing to decide to use cannabis. 79% tries first prescription medications, physical therapy, chiropractic, surgery, and when they have been treated at very different kinds of treatment approaches, then is when they go to the marijuana. Again, in California, beside of this culture to the body that have all that we think that have the Californians, again, the majority of the Californian users prefer to smoke marijuana better than other methods. There are some different studies that are demonstrating or that are showing how people who go to dispensaries of marijuana, where marijuana is allowed for medical purposes, also can be able to substitute cannabis for alcohol or for other drugs. I will not stop here, but the evidence here are growing. And I would like to do a parenthesis to talk also about the side effects of cannabis policy in people that self-medicate with cannabis. There was a study also made in US with people who attend medical dispensaries, and this study showed that this population have 2.5% more psychopathological symptoms than the external patients, the other patients that treat their illness in the normal or usual centers. But at the same time, these subjects reported moderate stress levels related with the criminality of marijuana. 76% were exposed to at least 119 policial harassment methods. So when we talk sometimes if marijuana produces psychopathology, maybe it has some possibilities that produce psychopathology, but maybe there are external factors that are independent of the pharmacology of cannabinoids that can also produce some kind of adverse events. I want to put an example. The first brain imaging that was published showing that cannabis users have reduced a part of the brain named hippocampo. The hippocampo is used by our brain to organize the reality, and this reality send it to the deposits of long-term memory. So we need our hippocampo to retrieve from our memory the things that we used to learn day by day. Well, if you have a more reduced hippocampi, you suffer also several kinds of psychopathology because you have less able to interact with the environment. Well, this was from 2006, I think, and effectively they found in US population that the subjects of the sample have a more reduced hippocampo compared with the control groups. They also score higher in the psychopathology test. Well, a couple of years ago was published a paper where also showed that people who experienced a life-changing religion experience had a long time was also his hippocampi being doing more little than before experiencing their religious experience. The researchers interpret this finding as that people who suffer this kind of mystic or religious experience are maybe more religious fanatic, and this maybe can cause more stigma in their environment. So these people have more levels of anxiety and stress, and we know that the higher levels of anxiety and stress induce cortisol and other hormones that go to the hippocampus and destroy it. Well, I think that this explanation could be also done in this sample. If we know that in US, people have suffered a lot of hundreds of policial harassment, we could think that maybe they are living also with very high levels of stress. What I want to do with, or say with this example is that it's very difficult in the context of prohibition to do independent and without prejudice research, because there are a lot of external factors that are influencing the results. I don't know how I'm with the time, but I think that I will finish now. Again, in Australia, the Australian people used to use cannabis for the same reasons that the rest of the world, so maybe there is some consistency between countries, and if there is a consistency, it's maybe because there are some objectable reasons to think that maybe marijuana can be useful for treating this kind of disease. They also prefer to smoke, as everybody in the rest of the world, and they find very great relief or good relief in nausea relief, in pain relief, in ability to cope emotionality, in appetite stimulant, and decrease in expansion tremor and relief through relaxation. And when they compared cannabis with prescription medicines, again, they said that cannabis have less secondary effects and worse are at least in the same way as prescription medicines. This is not a rule. It depends on the illness, of course, and these are studies of survey that have a very low level of evidence, but this is what people think. In Canada, there are also permits to grow cannabis for medical purposes. And as I said before, there are beginning to do studies regarding the use of cannabis for treating other or dependence to other drugs. And I would like to finish showing what I think that will be. I think that one of the active principles of cannabis, that is CBD, will be one of the medicines of the future. It has very interesting anticonvulsivant properties. Has also very interesting antipsychotic properties, and we don't have now antipsychotic medicines with a low profile of side effects. And what is one of the next approaches in which CBD will be used, and in US there is now permits from the FDA to use CBD for treating as a compassionate medicine for treating child epilepsy. There is only one survey study with childs between months and 17 years. They tried until 16 different medicines before trying CBD. After treating, there were childs that, by example, suffer more than 100 convulsions per day. This is very destroyed for these little bodies. There were another child that suffered between 200 or 300 seizures per week. And, well, these observational studies show how CBD tend to decrease the number of seizures in these patients. This is the reason why CBD is one of the drugs that the other day I learned that in Brazil also the government have approved CBD for treating epilepsy in children. And this is another example about regarding how when people don't receive attention from the public health service or from their doctors, there are peer-to-peer, is when begins the peer-to-peer information, and when something is useful, lots of patients stop believing in the public services and began to self-medicate. This is one of the, I think, negative things of these policies, and one of the reasons why it should be changed, because patients probably will be better educating regarding use of cannabis. Well, in Spain there are hundreds, or I don't know, maybe 800 of social cannabis clubs. Most of them are located in the Catalonian area, but also in the Basque Country. And, well, we are developing a study with patients that go to the cannabis clubs for medical purposes. And when there are some evidence And, well, I want to finish now. We are observing along 4 years patients with chronic illness. We have, as I told you before, the information of the clinical trials, but we don't know what happened with patients that are using cannabis alone several years, and this is what we're researching now. Thank you very much, and thank you.